Hey there, fish heads. Tony Baber here. I thought we'd go back and look at the 2021 season, talk about some of the lessons learned, the lakes that we fished, as well as some of the key baits throughout the season. That way, maybe it'll help you coming up in 2022. So let's get to it.
Searching for greatness in a sea of the dying and shameless, a sea of the aimless. I don't wanna be one of the nameless. I'ma wake up with the mindset that one day I'm gonna make it, and I don't think I'll be fine if I don't break my limitations. Don't try to stop me, I exist to write my own story.
All right, so let's get back to it and talk about the 2021 year. So there was a lot of tribulations and ups and downs and adversity that I had to overcome. And considering everything that kind of went on and everything that happened last year, I feel like we did pretty good overall. Not near as well as I thought we might or that I had hoped that we would, but there was a lot of stuff going on. So just to kind of give you a quick synopsis of it, the first tournament we had the control arm issues and the shifting issues, so I actually ended up not even fishing the first tournament at Dale Hollow. The second tournament, we came around and there was some small issues with it as far as kind of running and really the worst thing was the fuel line issue the first day of practice when we had a hole in the fuel line, so that kind of slowed down practice a little bit the first day. And then we come back to the third tournament, which was at Cumberland, and everything seemed to run actually pretty well there. I think the worst part about Cumberland was all the debris that was in the lake, so it made it kind of treacherous and worrisome as far as maybe hitting something and breaking something on the boat. And then you go to Cherokeelake, and for whatever reason, and I'm still not really sure what it was, but the boat was having a hard time getting up on plane. It was just not running quite right. Like it would get on plane, but then it just seemed like there wasn't any speed or really any juice to it. So had to deal with that, of course, the whole time. Then we come to the last tournament after I had to replace the jack plate, which had a broken screw on it in between tournaments. So once I went through all that and got everything kind of running again, the last tournament the boat actually ran as good as it ran all year long. So I feel like we're in a pretty good spot heading into 2022 with the boat as far as everything being worked out and kinks worked out and things like that. But we can get into that more on the next video when we start talking about 2022 and looking ahead to that. So I wanted to go back and just talk about some of the lessons learned or just some of the things that I experienced as far as my first full season fishing as a boater. So the first couple tournaments, of course, the first one had a really tough practice, and then we had the boat issues like late on the last day of practice, so I ended up not even being able to fish it. But part of the reason for that was because the practice was so hard. So I had a great plan going into it. I spent a lot of time studying maps and figuring out kind of a plan for each day of practice and going through things. And I think some of the hurdles that I had to encounter with the tournament or with practice for that tournament was really just not knowing the lake as well as, you know, someone who's been on it a lot as a boater and kind of making their own decisions. I spent a lot of time on the water there, but never in control of my own destinations, if you will. So I kind of went a little bit on some old history as far as the practice, and then there was a lot of new water that I wanted to explore and just kind of looking for seasonal patterns and just learning some of the lakes. So I think that was part of the problem, or some of the things that I had to encounter with that first tournament was just really learning and practicing. And that's just the way it goes, right? Sometimes you find fish in practice and sometimes you don't. But I think the thing that I did the best, or the best lesson taken from that, was the preparation. I don't think I have no plans of changing any of that as far as looking at maps and really making a plan going into practice. If there's anything that I would do, it would be exploring some more fertile water. I mean, some of the areas that I learned through the first two tournaments that I know are better areas that hold fish in the early springtime as far as Dale Hollow goes. So there's a few creeks that, you know, I just know are typically good creeks now after kind of fishing it last year and the year before that one tournament. So I've got some pretty good plans as far as going forward from there. So, you know, and I think it's helped me eliminate some water as well, which is what practice is all about, and what fishing year in and year out is all about, is just learning lakes and learning good areas of the lakes. So moving on to the second tournament, we had some great practice days, really figured out some good areas and some patterns going with the fish, and just felt really good confidence wise. It wasn't a terrible tournament as far as how it finished. I couldn't quite put all the fish in the boat that I thought I'd be able to. I think some of that falls back on me. So if there's a lesson learned there, it's, when you find a really good area that seems to have a lot of fish in it and it's not getting a ton of pressure from competitors and stuff, spend more time there. I spent over half of my day there, probably about 5.5 hours or so in that creek and in that general area fishing around. And I really think the biggest miss for my part was leaving it too early. So I left about 2 hours before weigh-in and started working my way back. And I really think if I'd have gone back through that area just one more time and spent another hour and a half or so in there and just really milked it for everything that it was worth, I probably could have picked up another fish or two and maybe even had a really good tournament. So that's one of the lessons that I learned was just, kind of base your tournament more from the aspect of what did you find in practice, how good was the water, how many bites did you get, and how confident are you in the area. Don't just limit yourself. Like, I kind of set a plan in my head, like, by 12:30, 1 o'clock I'm going to start working back. Don't limit yourself like that with your plan necessarily. Obviously, if you've slayed them, then start working your way back. But where I was sitting in that tournament, I should have just adjusted my plan and maybe hit it a little bit harder one last time before making my way back, because the areas I had on the way back weren't as good. It was more of I was hoping to maybe catch one or two fish if I really needed to finish out a limit. But tournament day, that just didn't work out that way for me, and that's the way it goes. But like I said, it's all about decision making. I think that's one of the things that we can all learn and do better, tournament to tournament, day to day, fishing for fun or whatever it is just getting better and better at decision making and recognizing the good decisions from the bad decisions. And that's one of the things that I really learned in that second tournament, was just talking about decision making and really just strategy and playing that out on the water the day of the tournament. So moving forward to Lake Cumberland, it was kind of a interesting tournament. So practice, the first day I had a lot of good bites in some areas and really had a ton of confidence after the first day of practice. I had a really good spinnerbait bite going, which for me, if you've ever paid attention to anything I do, I love throwing a spinnerbait. So the fact that I had that bite going for me was just really gave me a ton of confidence after that first day. But the problem that kind of propped up after that was each day after that, the next 2 days, because I practiced for 3 days, the next 2 days that bite just kept going further and further away from me. It wasn't near as consistent. I wasn't getting near as many bites. The few bites that I was getting was still decent quality. It just wasn't consistent as it was the first day. So it was kind of in my head, I wasn't really sure what was going on. I wasn't sure if it was the bite like going away from me, or if it was the fact that I was just fishing different sections of the lake. So for Cumberland, it's such a huge lake. It's 57 to 63,000 acres depending on water level, which is a ton of water to really learn and figure out and cover, especially in practice. So as I fished at one end of the lake, I was clear on the east end of the lake down by Burnside, and I was really getting good strong bites. The water was a little bit dirtier, just more on that river end of the lake. And then as I moved to like the second day of practice more towards mid-lake, and third day more towards like the west end, closer to the dam, it just seemed like that bite was kind of going away from me. And I thought it was just the location on the lake that I was at. But I really, obviously, as it played out tournament day, it really was just that bite was going away from me. It wasn't necessarily where I was at in the lake. I think it was just the conditions changing and the cold front and everything kind of playing out the way it did. I think it just took that bite away from me. I felt like Jason Christie at the Classic a few years ago at Grand Lake, if you guys remember that. It was, super strong spinnerbait bite. He was catching them really well. And then that last day, it just went away from him, and he ended up not being able to finish out the tournament and win. And that's exactly how I felt with that, was just that spinnerbait bite was just going away from me a little bit, and I just didn't make the right adjustment. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You want to be committed to a bait. You don't want to question yourself too much. So I was really pushing hard and just kind of playing that out, and I wanted to see how it was, and I was committed to that bite. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out for me, and I didn't make the adjustments that I needed to make. So if there's a lesson to be learned there is, be determined and confident in the pattern that you figure out in practice and kind of your plan going into the tournament, but also don't be afraid to make adjustments. If it's not working, be able to recognize that it's not working the way it should and make those adjustments. Go more finesse or change to more of a slower approach. Just whatever the conditions are telling you, and really pay attention to those conditions. It's not to say that I threw nothing but a spinnerbait all day. I did try some other stuff, but it just wasn't the right adjustments for that water, and I didn't read the conditions as well as maybe I should have. So then fast forward to June, and we went to Lake Cherokee. Now this was really an interesting test for me because I had never ever fished Cherokee Lake, didn't know a whole lot about it other than the research that I had done online and some of the videos and just things that I've looked at as far as that goes. I do have some friends that live down there. I kind of talked to them a little bit going into before practice and stuff, just to get some ideas of areas or patterns or anything that they could help me out with. It didn't really work out for me as far as the initial conversations that I had with them. We got down there the first day of practice and couldn't catch hardly anything. Whatever we did catch was just smaller ones. They weren't keepers. It wasn't what we were looking for. We weren't finding the populations. And some of the areas that I really had a lot of confidence in from map study as far as how they set up and summertime patterns go, I really thought we'd be able to catch some, like bridges and just backs of creeks and really some of them humps out in the middle of the lake and really a lot of different patterns and stuff, but none of them seemed to work out for me all that well. So after the first day of practice, kind of was spun out a little bit, talked to my friend again. He was actually fishing in the tournament, and he was coming down that night. So he was like, give me a call tomorrow while you're out there. We'll see what we got going on, and I'll, give you some tips if I can figure anything out. So we go back out the second day, and we're hitting a little different area of the lake and trying some different stuff, and come to find out, one of the baits or patterns that I kind of thought might work out was, throwing a brush hog and flipping some of the bushes, because the water was up in the bushes and there was a lot to do there, and I love flipping. And I was running through that stuff in practice and just wasn't getting any bites. And then I talked to my buddy, and he's like, yeah, I'm catching them with a brush hog in bushes. So it was kind of a good feeling in the back of my head, because I felt like I was doing the right thing. Like I had made the right adjustment as far as from day one to day two. And as far as just things that I have confidence in, we hadn't found the right area yet. And having him kind of give me that information gave me even more confidence, obviously, because he's telling me how well he's getting bites and things like that. So I had even more confidence to really push that bait even harder, because I was back and forth with it. I wasn't really being real thorough with it just because I wasn't getting the bites. But after that, I obviously pushed a lot harder, and we ended up really getting some consistent bites and finding some good areas of fish. And I got some bites on a Carolina rig, which I figured out on my own out in deeper water, fishing some of the humps and things like that. So I had a couple ideas, going in after day two. And then day three took basically our pattern that we had, expanded, found some more areas, and also expanded the pattern. So I found some stuff on my own, just kind of making adjustments and kind of thinking about what was going to happen. Got on basically a bluegill pattern, throwing a thunder cricket chatterbait, and it really worked out well for me. That's what I threw most of the day during the tournament. Caught some good ones in the tournament, missed one, which kind of hurt me a little bit, and just didn't quite finish with all the fish that I thought I'd be able to get based on how practice went, but I did have a pretty strong finish. I believe it was a top 50 for me. I don't remember exactly, but I feel like it was a top 50. Didn't get a check, but it was just, I'd made improvements with each tournament leading into that. Every tournament I was finishing higher and higher in position. So, I was building some good momentum after the slow start to the season, missing the first tournament. So then a couple months off, did some more work to the boat, got the jack plate replaced, and then we come back to Cumberland in September. Now this is one that I had a lot of confidence going into, because I've done really well at Cumberland in September. Unfortunately, it was just one of those that it was a tough tournament for everybody. The guys that caught them really well, but there wasn't a lot of people that did. So it was kind of the same thing. Ran all over the lake, couldn't really find a consistent bite anywhere, didn't find a lot of bites anywhere, but I had some ideas of kind of where I would go, and ended up making a long run again come tournament day, because I just couldn't find anything else on the other end of the lake at the west end. So ran all the way back up to the east end, ended up catching one all the way up there, and just didn't really pan out as well as I thought it would. I mean, we had a few bites in there in practice, kind of left it alone, going on some different strategy, trying not to pressure the fish as much in practice, wasn't catching fish, would get one or two bites and kind of leave the area and just leave it as is and hope that maybe that would work out. It's kind of a strategy I'm going to use forward, going into this season, is just not over pressuring areas and getting my bait in front of too many fish. Figure something out, get some bites, and just realize that there's fish there. I think it's more important to find the fish than it is to find the pattern. If you happen to find a really strong pattern, that's great. But what I learned this year was sometimes those patterns go away from you. So that's kind of a synopsis of all the tournaments. As far as the baits go, the early March time, the first tournament, of course, we weren't getting a lot of baits or bites, and, one of the things that we had heard from guys was throwing a chatterbait around wood with them cold water temperatures, just kind of slow rolling it around there, tossing a worm around. It's kind of some of the stuff that we had heard in practice. Basically, the way the tournament finished was the guy that won the tournament actually had caught him down at a completely separate end of the lake that I never even went down and practiced at. So that was kind of another lesson learned was, don't be afraid to keep pushing water and finding new areas to fish. Don't limit yourself to just some of the areas that you maybe figured out as far as in your preparation for each tournament, but really keep an open mind and try new water at all times if you're struggling to find a pattern. So second tournament, of course, it was a very, very, very good crankbait bite. So there was a couple different baits that were being thrown as far as by me and by Mike and some of the people that we know and talk to, but it seemed like it was a pretty good crankbait bite. Not near as good of a slow bite that I typically have down there. We couldn't get anything on an umbrella rig, but it would just seem to be those smaller wiggle wart, rock crawler type baits that were in those crawl patterns, but like that aggressive pattern, something that had some chartreuse and some yellow and just those really bright contrasting colors for some of the muddier water that we were facing for that tournament. Now, when we came to Cumberland, of course, because of the high water, the water was dirty. There was a lot of debris in the water, so there was a few different things that were kind of working. I got a couple bites flipping trash mats, which if you've never heard me talk about them before, for me, trash mats are a huge confidence thing. If you find a bunch of stuff just piled into a cove or a pocket, never skip it. Always throw a creature bait of your choice in there. I like throwing the adrenaline bugs in there. The 4-inch model, it's just a great bite bite down in there, and it's also a good bait that gets through that wood because of the profile of it, and it gets you down through that trash with the proper kind of setup and gear. Another thing, of course, was the spinnerbait. Throwing a double willow spinnerbait in more of natural colors and clearer water, and something more of a yellow and chartreuse and a coleslaw color in those dirty waters. Always throwing a spinnerbait come that May time of year. You start pushing towards post spawn, getting close to shad spawn and stuff. Spinnerbait bite is a hugely successful bite. Always keep one tied on when you get around that time of year. Now, come June, when we were at Cherokee, of course, that flipping bite was that was where it was at. We were throwing a brush hog, green pumpkin with some chartreuse on it, just flipping those bushes, and it was just there one day of practice. It seemed like almost every other bush we'd flip into, we were getting bites, as long as you were in the right areas that have populations of fish. So that was a huge thing. I also heard that one of the guys that finished second place in the tournament, I believe it was, through a mutual friend, that he was catching them on a buzzbait. It was something I had thrown a lot during practice, but unfortunately I just didn't figure out, or maybe I wasn't throwing the right size or profile bait. But that time of year, June, that buzzbait bite can be absolute fire, especially when they're up in them bushes and you can throw that buzzbait around them bushes. So always keep that pattern in mind. Come to September, of course, you start pushing into that shad, that late shad fall push, when it starts going to the backs of the creeks and getting in the trees and stuff. And I think that's where a lot of people were having most of their success that did really well. You had to cover a ton of water and just hit many pockets, to just cover all them little pockets and then backs of coves and creeks and just cover all that area. I don't think it was anything that you could just go into one cove or one creek and really catch them. I think a lot of guys were running in and out of a lot of different pockets and just catching fish that way, get one here, one there, that kind of thing. And the bait of choice seemed to be a buzz bait, also thunder cricket or a chatterbait, those kind of baits, and a little bit with the spinnerbait. So the bites that I had and the bite that I had tournament day was on a spinnerbait, and in practice I had a couple bites on spinnerbaits and chatterbaits, and I think that's just the way it was. You know, it's that shad imitating bite. You know, you had to have that white or white chartreuse and just basically go to work and cover a lot of water to get those bites, because those fish were getting pressured really hard because everybody was fishing the backs of the creek. So made it a lot harder, I think, for everybody because of that. The fishing pressure was so immense as far as the backs of the creeks, and it just really made it a tough bite. But if you could labor through it and have the confidence in it and really push and cover a lot of water, it seemed to be that was the trick and what really did it for a lot of people. So that kind of sums up 2021. We'll look forward to 2022 here soon. I'll put out another video and we'll talk about our plans going forward and just what's going on and where we're fishing. And we got a new lake coming to our tournament season this year that we fished a few years ago. It's been probably 3-4 years since I've been on it, so I'm pretty excited to get back there. One of my best finishes, or actually my best finish, came on that lake. So keep your eyes open and keep your ears listening and tuned in, and we'll be launching that video here soon. Thank you guys for watching. Good luck and good fishing.
I see the aimless, I don't wanna be one of the nameless. I'm a